Net Security, the Sunflower Group, Choice Solutions, and YouLearn24.com. If you could please give them a round of applause. I'd also like to recognize the silver sponsors, and they too are on the back. We have AB May, CCS, Randy Reed, and Scarborough. Please give them a round of applause. All right, as you can imagine, putting on something like this takes a lot of effort and time and planning. And so I'd like the board members in the room to please stand up, along with anybody who has volunteered for today, so we can recognize you for all your help today. Please stand up. All right. So just curious, how many first-timers today to this luncheon? Wow, a lot of folks. So you're probably wondering, who are these people and what are they doing and how did I get here? So a lot of you were probably invited by somebody who cares about you. But to give you an idea a little bit about what IRC, Integrity Resource Center, does, just inside the brochure that you were just looking at on the second page, and Rick's going to go ahead and talk more about this too, but really the goal is to equip business leaders and folks in the business to be more bold about their faith, to feel like they can talk about their faith without repercussions. And in fact, our speaker today is a very good example of that. So the goal today is to encourage you to embrace and live God's principles in your workplace. That's the goal for today. Just a quick reminder, we're going to do some raffle tickets. And where is the fishbowl, Kathy? Is it out there? Okay. You'll have another opportunity. We're going to do a raffle at the end, right around 1 o'clock. But we're going to be raffling off some things. But in the meantime, I'd really like to introduce the man behind Integrity Resource Center. His name is Rick Box, and Rick is a personal friend of mine. We met in a very pivotal year for me. It was 2001, and he continues to be a good friend and a big part of my life. And so, Rick, why don't you come up here, and he has some kind words for us. Rick Box.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to this first for 2013 quarterly lunch event. It's great to see so many new faces and people to be able to join us. As Dan mentioned, if you want to learn a little more about Integrity Resource Center, there is information in your program. We don't have a lot of time to cover much, but I do want to hit a couple of things for you here briefly. First of all, we are a nonprofit ministry located here in Kansas City that happens to have impact all over the world, and we do a lot of different things, but we have big dreams, and our big vision is we want to be a part of seeing over 1 million leaders actually put a smile on God's face because they're learning and modeling and living out God's principles in their workplace. So we do a lot of different things to try and help facilitate that. But I want to hone in on just kind of one area today that I want to talk about. We have some exciting new things going on that I just wanted to share. And you'll notice many of you have heard us talk about FIRE in the workplace if you've been here before. FIRE is an acronym that stands for Faith, Integrity, Relationships, and Excellence. And because we do have some new things rolling out, we just recently kind of upgraded and did some changes to our look and feel for the FIRE in the workplace information. We have a process that's kind of a four-step process that we encourage people to get involved with that relates to this FIRE in the workplace. Jerry, if you can scroll back to that 4 steps there. We have a FIRE assessment that is a free self-assessment tool on our website that you can go to, and it will help you gauge how well am I doing living out my faith. We also have what we call a FIRE covenant. We believe, much like what happened in the book of Nehemiah, that it's helpful for people to actually sign and make a written commitment to God for accountability's sake, for a reminder as to what you've committed to. And so we have that on our website as well that we encourage people to do. And then we have a course, a FIRE in the Workplace course that we have both as an online video course and also, what I'm going to talk about here in a second is a brand new small group study that we have for that as well. And then finally, the last step is we want more people to help us reach that 1 million person goal, and that's going to require a lot of you and others around the world to also become leaders in this movement and to facilitate small group meetings, to help train and equip other people as well. And so we have a process for that. But I wanted to talk for a moment today about our new small group study. We have a Fire in the Workplace study that we've just finished. It's getting ready to be published on Amazon here in the next couple of days so that it's available. And so we want as many people as possible. We believe this is a foundational tool to help people really lay down good foundation and understand how to live out their faith in their workplace in a way that would be pleasing and honoring to God. And so we have some people that are willing to lead some small group studies that if you see on your response card at your table, you can check mark a box there that if you have an interest in learning more about these fire groups, then you can check that and we will circle back to you with a list of the names and the dates and the locations that different groups will be available that you can sign up for and go through this new study. It's a 6-week small group study, so it doesn't take a real long commitment, but it gives you a good foundation to get moving and get started. So we encourage you to do that. The other last thing that I want to point out before I bring Kelly up is we believe strongly that it's important to celebrate what God is doing in the lives of people. And we are about to host our second Fire in the Workplace banquet. And the first one was really just a cool evening of listening to stories of what God has been doing in and through the lives of people here in our own backyard. And so there's a couple of things that you can do to help us with that. Number one is March 7th is the date, and we would encourage you to mark your calendar and join us that evening right back here at the Overland Park Marriott in the evening for a banquet of that evening. But also, we're soliciting and we're looking for your recommendations of people that you know, that you think are kind of heroes of yours in the faith as to how they're living out, whether that be a great story with their ethics or maybe with excellence in how they carry out their products and services and they do it in a way that honors and pleases God, or courageous faith stories, whatever. We want your help in giving us some feedback. So you can even write on the back of your response cards today, if you have a name or a suggestion of somebody that we should contact. We have a team of reporters that are going out and interviewing people and soliciting for these stories. So please help us with that. You can also do that on our website as well. So we need stories, and then also companies and people that want to sponsor that event. We're just now really trying to circle back around and line up sponsors for that March 7th event as well. So that's really what I wanted to cover today about Integrity Resource Center. Like I said, you can read a lot more in your program and learn a little more about some of the other offerings and things that we can provide. But now it's my pleasure that we get, when we've polled business people in the past as to why they have struggles at times living out faith at work, one of the common concerns that we heard was people said, well, I don't know what I can do legally. I don't want to get sued. And we heard that enough over the last several years that we said, well, it's time to kind of knock those legs out from underneath people's stool. Let's give them the facts so that they can then move forward accordingly. So we've invited our speaker today to come and join us from Dallas, Texas. Kelly is the head of Liberty Institute, a nonprofit organization that is focused on Christian rights. And they've helped a lot of people deal with the kinds of issues that we might be concerned about here in this room as far as Christian rights in the workplace. So we've invited Kelly to come. They have some fascinating statistics. Kelly's represented cases to the Supreme Court, and I think if I read correctly, it's kind of a 9-0. You've won 9 cases and lost none, which is pretty impressive. And they've battled against the ACLU many, many times. Before I bring Kelly up, we do want to give him a warm welcome to Kansas City, even though it's not warm outside. He was telling me that he came in from 75 degrees yesterday in Dallas to 8 degrees when he landed this morning. But first we're going to show a video that Kelly wants you to see, and then Kelly will join us on stage right after that. So let's give him a warm welcome while we're waiting for the video to queue up.
What your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
That we want our national policy based on what we know in our hearts is morally right. We cannot...
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream.
Thank you for making the nation proud, and may God bless America.
God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Democracy demands that the religiously motivated translate their concerns into universal rather than religion-specific values.
We're not allowed to say God over at the cemetery.
And she's even received threats, and the police are having to protect her because she wants to pray at her graduation.
Am I going to say, okay, we don't have to use the name Jesus, I'll just pray a general, non-specific prayer? Or am I going to say, no, as a man in America?
The freedoms that we guarantee other people are not guaranteed to us here in America.
Religious speech by little children is being singled out and punished.
Whether or not this country really believes in the First Amendment, do you allow people to have protected speech, even if it's religious?
I got a call that the chapel was on fire.
A fire rips through 4 buildings in Gettysburg this morning, destroying the Civil War chapel.
Investigators say they're just still trying to figure out whether it was purposely set on fire.
We're the United States of America, founded under God, and we cannot let one person attempt and try and threaten and bully us to take that out.
If they put you there for it, they put you there for it. That's all it's good, as long as they tell them to do it. And jail for closing.
First, the elementary schools would basically be a free speech free zone.
Sued for banning prayer and the word God from military funerals.
Someone tells you about the separation of church and state, you look them dead in the eye and you say, that's not about tearing down monuments. That's not about scrubbing God's name off of monuments. That's not about telling kids they can't pray at school. That's not what the separation of church and state is about. The separation of church and state, the battle over that idea is this right here. It is the government invading the province of religion, and we must stand against it as our forefathers did.
I do not believe in a fate that will fall on us no matter what we do. I do believe in a fate that will fall on us if we do nothing.
volunteer attorneys all over the country with the most powerful law firms in the country who all give their time because they care about their country and their faith. And so just realize there's always a place to turn. How did I get involved in this? Back when I was in high school, I knew I had gifts in analytical thinking and speaking, and I thought, well, I either need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And people said, isn't that kind of a God or Satan choice? And, as I prayed about it and really, talked to my youth minister, and he said, I will say this, if you're called to be a pastor, what a wonderful calling. But I will say this, there are a lot of Christian pastors, and boy, we sure could use some more Christian lawyers. And as I really prayed about it, I really realized my calling was more to justice and law, and I just felt compelled. And I was in law school, and I should have been an average law student with my intelligence scores and all that kind of thing. And to be honest, I spent less time than my friends studying because my heart was still for ministry. So I was spending a lot of my time in church, leading discipleship ministry for the college students. And yet when the grades came back, I was making all the high grades. And it was just the Lord's way to show me, I want you to use this. And so when I got out, I clerked for a federal judge. You do that for a year. You kind of research or write opinions. And at the end of that year, you get all these nice offers because the law firms want somebody who's seen what it's like on the other side. And so I was getting all these offers, and I just thought, Lord, I would suffocate if I went and did a normal law job. I just don't feel called to do that. And I remember thinking, well, what do you want to do? I thought, well, I want to use my legal skills. I think the Lord showed me that. I want to work on cases, but I want to help pastors and churches and religious freedom and our founding principles. And I'd even like to go to seminary part-time. And I laughed because there was no job like that in the United States, certainly for pay. And then 2 weeks later, I had a call from two guys I'd never met. They were partners in major law firms, and they said, look, we started to donate our time for religious freedom, and we're now starting to get so many calls, it's hurting our ability to make a living. So what we were wondering is, would you be willing to come on, work on legal cases, help pastors, churches, and religious freedom and our founding principles, and you could even go to seminary part-time if you want to. So me being a, I guess, somewhat spiritually immature mid-20s, I said, let me pray about it. Like that wasn't an answer to prayer. And the next morning, I came to my senses and said yes, and they said, how much you need to live on? And I was making $28,000 as a clerk for a federal court at the time, so I was easy. And that's how I started 24 and a half years ago. And so I just say that because I think everybody's story is a little different, but God had a plan for how, that wasn't a normal plan. This wasn't a position that was out there open. And so there's all kinds of things that you can do where you are that maybe have never been done. I mean, maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but if you just follow the Lord's lead, incredible things. I mean, Liberty Institute now is the largest legal organization in the country that focuses exclusively on religious liberty. And it started from really something that didn't even exist 24 and a half years ago. So let me, here's my message. But message number one, which you probably already know, is bad out there. And it's much worse than I've ever seen. And just the rapidity of the attacks are worse. And look, you've got the HHS mandates with Obamacare that are out there right now, where you've got over 43 lawsuits last I saw have been filed so far against it. You essentially have the federal government ordering religious organizations, religious business, or businesses that are run by Christians, ordering them to violate their faith, to affirmatively engage in acts that violate their faith. That has never happened in this country. This is unprecedented what is going on. I mean, everybody's aware of the Hobby Lobby, 1.3 million a day. There's a number of other of these. We have, of the 43, we have a number of those lawsuits as well. And we expect there to be a lot more as more and more businesses start running into this and realize, I can't do this. I can't be a part of giving abortifacients to my employees in my conscience. So all kinds of things are happening. We've got Bibles that were actually banned last year from being brought in by families to visit wounded soldiers in Walter Reed Hospital. We've got, as you saw in here, the case we had where the VA had actually banned the mention of God at all the military funerals across the country. We've got, churches. When I started doing this 24 years ago, the idea of representing a church, I would have laughed at you. I would have said, we don't represent churches in this country against the government. Well, now we get a new case every week with a church that just wants to be a church, wants to come into existence, wants to do what churches do, wants to feed the homeless, and they're under attack. Whether it's from zoning laws or all kinds of different. We just got through Oregon, a huge Court of Appeals case about whether a church could increase the size of their own sanctuary. The city had made up an ordinance that they had to get permission of 60% of the city before they could do that. Now, that ordinance didn't apply if you're a strip joint or a bar or a restaurant. They only apply to one entity in the city, churches. So this is the way things are different, and you can look at this later if you want to see or show your friends if they're skeptical. But we did a little survey. We just kind of went around and collected a number of the cases. This is about 12 a page on here of attacks on religious freedom across the country. I mean, it's every age group. It's from a 10-year-old boy who was caught praying over his meal in the lunch cafeteria. He was physically lifted out of his seat and taken to the principal's office and told to never do that again, all the way to senior citizens who were told specifically by the federal government that they had to stop their praying over their meals or that their meals would be taken away because they're federally funded. It's every community. It's not the North. I mean, it's not just the North. It's the South. It's not just places you would consider more liberal. It's conservative. It's in every situation you can imagine. And so what I'm saying is, this cannot be avoided. And sometimes, as Christians, we think, well, we can just avoid that. This can't be avoided. It's everywhere, and it's going to have to be confronted, and it is being confronted. So I just wanted to make sure you knew sort of the landscape. But what that says is, I mean, we're literally about to lose our country if people aren't willing to stand up and redeem our country. And I feel like our job a lot of times is to go and sort of almost hold things back so that there's freedom. But you know what? If nobody's walking in there with that freedom to bring the truth of Christ, then there's no hope for this country. And so the kind of things that you guys are doing, to me, is critical if we're going to have a country. People have to hear the truth. We've got to redeem. There's all kinds of garbage around the country, and sunlight's the best disinfectant, and that's what we need. We need a lot of sunlight. And so this is just a crucial time. So, the headline of the talk, faith at work, is it legal? Absolutely. Not only is it legal, it's actually protected by federal law, faith at work. And so let me just I'm just going to lay out the very basics so you'll have those. And the ultimate thing is, know that there's a place for you to call if you have a question. Satan's, every time if you see Satan at work, there's usually two things going on: misinformation and fear. And it's kind of when I talk to pastors, it's the same kind of thing. I said, the only thing holding you back is your own self-censorship. It's not the laws of this country. All this fear and intimidation is from misinformation. This is a country that was built on religious freedom, and our laws protect that. So, and it's really the same way, probably even more so in the workplace, which probably surprises you. Let me lay out and by the way, this comes from, there's a federal law called Title VII that applies. Any entity that has 15 or more employees. Most states also have almost the exact same kind of provisions in their states as well. But the basics are, number one, that an employer cannot discriminate against an employee on the basis of their religion. And what that means is, essentially, you can't be some sort of adverse employment action like, you're fired, or you didn't get the promotion, or whatever. But it also means that you can't give benefits or treat. You have to have same treatment. You can't treat one person this way and one person a different way. So you can't say, for instance, you guys can have your meeting in your free time before work starts in the room over here, but you Christians, you can't meet over here in the room over here. Or yes, you can talk about this, in the break room or at lunch. You can talk about, not that you'd want to talk about the Chiefs, but you could talk about the Chiefs in the break room. I happen to know the owner. He's a good Christian guy. You can talk about that, and people are probably going to talk about those kind of things in the break room. But as soon as somebody mentions religion, they say, "Don't you ever say that at work." Well, that's a violation. Okay, that's discrimination on the basis of religion. So there is basic protection. We've seen it with emails. I've seen people that are allowed to send emails on personal things, with people in the company, or invite people to things, or there's a board where they invite people to things, but as soon as they invite people to something Christian, they want to shut it down. That's religious discrimination. That's against the law. That's against federal law. It's probably against state law to do that. So there's a protection there. But even more so, number two, is not only can they not discriminate, but number two, they're affirmatively required under law to accommodate religion if they can, if it doesn't cause an undue hardship. And so that can, now look, let me explain this one. This one is not as obvious as discriminate. This one really requires the employee to communicate something. I mean, for instance, if your employer is doing something that is asking you to violate your faith, the employer is not going to know that unless you communicate that to them. So if they want you to go to some, New Age seminar that wants you to engage in weird activity that violates your faith, or anything along those lines, you're going to have to communicate that before they now have a responsibility to realize, hey, there's a religious objection here, and let's see if we can accommodate. The most common cases on this, for instance, are the religions that have Saturday being the Sabbath. And therefore, their schedule their faith tells them that they can't work from sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night. And they say, look, I need an accommodation. I need to do my schedule around this. And if employers can do that, they're required to do that by law. I mean, if they can do schedules around and make that work, then that's a requirement. So there's not only a requirement not to discriminate, but also to even affirmatively accommodate. And now, undue hardship is the exception. And so one of my favorite examples of a case was the guy who felt like he needed to write scripture verses down in the workplace, in his free time, but in the workplace. But the problem is, it was an undue hardship that he did it on the toilet paper that people were going to use when they went to the bathroom. Okay? So there are limits to what people want to do. If it causes some sort of hardship to the business, if they lose customers, if they're going to lose money, if it, obviously they're, if they can do it without causing a hardship to the business, then they're required to do it. So, I mean, that's really the simplicity of the two rights. And so what I would say, the summary of these laws, and this applies to both employers, if you're an employer or employee, is there is religious freedom in this country. For you as an employer and for you as an employee. If you're an employer, can you have Bible studies? Absolutely you can have Bible studies. Companies all over the country have Bible studies. The only restriction on you as an employer is you can't force people to attend a Bible study, or say, if you don't come to the Bible study, there are going to be consequences, or you're not going to get the promotion, or whatever else. But, I mean, can you have Bible studies? Absolutely you can have Bible studies. Can you have chaplains? Can you have full-time chaplains on staff? Yes. I mean, a number of groups do that. Companies that are big enough, Interstate Batteries, a number of these companies. And if you can't, you can do part-time chaplains, like the guys we have here. I know there's guys in my building that do the same thing. Corporate Chaplains of America. There's marketplace chaplains or marketplace ministries. They provide these because you know what? There's a lot of people in your workplace probably that are never going to go into a church. But you know what? They have people that die. They have weddings. They have all kinds of situations where there's a chance for them to be touched. If you provide that chaplain in the workplace. So there are lots of opportunities out there, and there are incredible freedoms out there for both employers and employees to actually make a difference. And the things that are restricted are things that no Christian would really ever want to do anyway, which is try to force things on people, to try to punish people if they don't follow their faith. So that's the good news about the law. Actually, a number of years ago, I got a call from Good Morning America. They were about to do a story on Chick-fil-A, if I'm not mistaken. They had discovered that they had some stuff about God in their, in their company information and all this, and they thought they'd uncovered the secret. And they were just going to kill him. They were going to kill him in this national story, And they called me, I mean, you're going to laugh, but they called me as the objective expert on religious freedom in the workplace. And because I'd taught and spoken on some of this, and so I said to the reporter, I said, no, let me explain to you what the law is. I said, this is the way everybody would want it, whether you're liberal or conservative. This is religious freedom for everybody, whatever their faith. If you're an employee, you get to follow your faith. The employer can't tell you not to. If you're an employer, you get to follow your faith. And the only restriction is that you let them follow their faith. This is religious freedom for everybody. It's the best system you can do. And they were like, oh. And they ended up doing this really positive story on Chick-fil-A and on how America is great and so advanced and it was an incredibly positive story because it really is the truth. Our laws do protect religious freedom for everybody. So I just say, be creative. Just think about ways that you can do that. Let me ask you a question that will probably make you feel uncomfortable. Have you spent as much time trying to be creative about how the Lord can work in your workplace as you have about how your business can be successful or whatever you're working on has been successful or creative to make money? Put a little time into maybe grab some other people and pray about what you can do and how creative you can be in bringing Christ into the workplace. A number of years ago, I had a group ask me to come speak to them that had just started called Laborers in the Field of Evangelism, Life. You could probably still find them on the web or somewhere else. This is a group of educators that said, what we want to do in the schools is we want to form a ministry, and we're forming a ministry of educators leading other educators to Christ. Whether it's a principal, a vice principal, a teacher. And so it's exactly these. So they said, what are our rights? And I said, well, it's religion in the workplace. This is freedom. And so if you're a supervisor over somebody, you can invite them to church. You can do all these things. You just can't in any way punish them or coerce them or anything like that. And so we just talked about this and laid out those principles. And they had, I think, 100 different ideas on how that they would have these meetings with the other educators that are part of the group on how to begin to try to do things. Just little bitty ideas, like putting a prayer box in the faculty room. That if they had prayer needs, they could put their little prayer needs in the prayer box and somebody would pray for them. And those teachers would get that and they would say, oh, let's pray for so-and-so. And they would go to so-and-so and say, we're praying for you. And then later on, they would invite them to a little luncheon like this, and there would be a time where people could come to know the Lord. In 2 years, this ministry that was in 2 school districts, in 2 years, 550 educators came to Christ. And so that's just a creative, people saying, I'm going to go do something. And that ministry is still going on and having great impact in people's lives. So there are a lot of ways to do things. I want to show you the negative here of what happens when, if you didn't do anything. This is the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial Cross that was put up in 1934 by the hands of World War I vets. And the ACLU went in, got an order to actually tear it down. But while it was on appeal, this is what the court ordered to be done. That it be essentially put in a bag with a chain around the bottom. Now, we went to the Supreme Court. We represented over 4 million veterans, the VFW, the American Legion, the Military of the Purple Heart, all these major veterans groups. And the Supreme Court reversed this decision, and that bag is gone, and that cross is now up permanently where it was put in 1934. But that case was reversed at the Supreme Court 5-4. So we're one vote from this being the law. And so what I'm telling you is there's freedom right now. But we God never promised us we'd always have it. So while we have freedom, we need to exercise it. And I mean, we need to try to keep it, which is what we're trying to do. But we also need to walk into those open spaces we have right now and do something with it. So, and one of the lies we get told all the time is one person or a couple of people can't change anything. And that is just so false. It's how everything gets changed. It's never majorities of people that change things. It's one person that stands up and then the whole community stands behind them. And I see it all the time. One of the people you saw in the little video we were doing there was Angela Hildenbrand, who was a valedictorian, who was told that by a federal judge that if she mentioned God or prayer in her valedictory address, she would actually be, quote, incarcerated. And she was the only student who would stand up against that order. That order was going to become precedent for the country. And she and her dad stepped forward at the end. And not only did we get that reversed, but now, so we not only got rid of this sword that was going to be at the neck of every kid in this country at graduation, but it's now been replaced by a higher level precedent that says you can't ever do this to a kid at graduation. Because one girl was faithful. And there were other, I can tell you stories, there were people who had the opening statement and closing statement of that graduation, Christian families, who when they were contacted said, well, we just don't want to make a fuss. We don't want to cause trouble. Well, one time I was told we were coming to town and there was somebody that said, we got you on these other stations, but this main Christian station, they said that we can't have you on because they're a station of comfort. And I was like, well, so Jesus and John the Baptist couldn't be on either? Christianity's all about comforting people with the truth, but sometimes the truth isn't so comfortable. Our manner needs to be loving, but we don't ever need to back off the truth. But there are other examples of Coons cheerleaders. I think of these little girls. Some of you probably saw this story. It made a lot of press, but these are 15, 16-year-old girls that last summer decided they were tired of kill the other team, mash the other team. So they thought, well, what can we do? We want to do something that encourages both teams. And so they thought, well, Scripture is encouraging. So when the teams came through, they had these banners that said things like, if God is for you, who can be against you? And you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Well, all the community, they loved it. Everybody loved it. And then this group, Freedom from Religion Foundation out of Madison, Wisconsin, sends a letter all the way across country to this school district. And the next thing you know, the school district superintendent is on the loudspeakers threatening all the kids that if they mention God or put it on a sign or anything, they'll be punished. Well, we ended up going in. We had 48 hours before the football game. We actually got an injunction against the school that if you have a right to speak, you can't be discriminated against because the government doesn't like the way you're saying is religious. That's religious viewpoint discrimination. It's against the First Amendment, and the court so ruled. And we've had 2 hearings. We'll have a final trial this summer in this case. But I just think it's such a great example. These girls are 15, 16-year-old girls. They've been in the New York Times 3 times so far, the Wall Street Journal 3 times, the LA Times twice. It ends with a scripture verse, so I'm sure that reporter has lost their job by now. And my favorite part is they live in Coons. Coons has 2,100 people in that city. Those girls have over 50,000 Facebook fans to their Facebook page. And people are sending in stuff, consistently saying, look at what we did in our community. Look at how we displayed Scripture. Look at what we did in this way and in this way. There's pictures, they've just caused all kinds of commotion all over the country just because they were faithful. Just because they had an idea and thought, this is something we can do. So it's just not true that we can't do anything. Let me tell you one last story. And this is one of my favorite stories, because I just think it says everything about our country too. A number of years ago, I was having lunch, minding my own business, and I opened up my newspaper and I saw something I had never seen. It was senior citizens holding picket signs. And I said, what is this? And they had been told they could not pray over their meals in the senior center, and they couldn't sing gospel songs on the piano in the back, And one of them was a minister, and once a week they would get around a table and talk about the Bible, so they couldn't do that. And so we had a young attorney fresh out of the military, and I went to put this newspaper down, and I said, let's see if we can help these people. And like before I finished my sentence, he's peeling out of the parking lot. And he gets down to these seniors, and they say, look, we're the has-beens, we're the nobodies, we have no power in this town. There's these 4 guys in the city council, they control everything. We never thought anybody would help us, much less lawyers for free, but we just had to say something. And so this young attorney comes back to me and he says, okay, this city doesn't deserve to be warned, they should be destroyed. And I said, no. Christian organization, secular letter, there's this thing, the Constitution, you really ought to read it. Let's work this out. And I said, if they're crazy enough, if God wants us to fight this, they'll be crazy enough to say no, and we'll fight. And sure enough, that's what they did. They said religion's not allowed in government buildings, and which is bizarre. That's not the law. It never has been. And so we had a press conference, and it was kind of like this. And I had all 13 of our seniors behind me, and we finished. And I did something I'm sure the media people would tell you never to do. But if the Spirit leads, you do it. And so I just said, does anybody want to say anything? Well, at the end of the line is Barney Clark. Barney has a cowboy hat, a bolo tie, a western suit, which is his only suit, and cowboy boots. And Barney comes up to the microphone and he says, I fought in World War II for these freedoms, and I ain't going into the corner to pray. If they want to arrest me, fine, long as it says what it's arrested for praying. He turns around and walks in the back of the room. About an hour later, I get a call from Bill O'Reilly's producer saying, we want the guy in the hat. So Barney starts his whirlwind tour, and we end up testifying in the U.S. Senate, and which is Barney's first plane ride. He's been in the Navy. And we ended up at the end of this case with a permanent injunction. They can never interfere with those seniors again. And they're praying over their meal. They could never interfere with them singing gospel songs or studying the Bible. And we even won a little money just so they could have a celebration in the senior center. But my favorite part of this case is what happened after the case. Everybody in the city watched the so-called powerless people beat the city council, and they realized they weren't so all powerful after all. So they held a recall election, and they threw all 4 of them out of office. About a year ago, I got a postcard from one of the seniors because she wanted me to know that she was now one of the new city councilmen. And I just think that is a picture of our country. You know, people sitting around and go, well, what can I do? And I don't have the power, they do. When really, we can do whatever we want to do. And it doesn't even take a majority of people. Just enough people that are willing to stand for what's right and say, I'm going to change this thing. And so and that's just one of the privileges of doing what I get to do is that I stand next to these people all the time. And it's never a huge group of people. It's always 1 or 2 or 3 people. It's a small group. And as soon as they leave, communities come right behind them. So I think you find the same thing with whatever you do. So my challenge to you is just to be faithful, and you'll change everything. And just know that we're here if you need us. You can call us anytime just to ask a question, and know that if you're trying to do something significant, Satan will bring fear and misinformation to try to get you to censor yourself, because that's the way it works. And one of the things, we've got cards that you can sign. I just encourage you to get on the list so you can see what's happening out there, because what is probably going to give you some ideas. Number one, of maybe some attacks that are happening in your community that you don't know about if you see them in other areas of the country, or maybe even things that other people are doing that are ministry ideas that you could do. But I'd love for you to just be a part of the whole religious freedom battle, to be praying for people like Angela when she's all alone as a valedictorian going into court with our attorneys. We need prayer cover, and we need folks involved. We're just essentially building an army that's going to preserve religious freedom in this country and hopefully restore it back to the way the founders put it in place in the very beginning. That's where we're trying to go. But I want to thank you for what you're doing, for being a part of this ministry. I want to thank Rick for what he's doing. This is just crucial. Again, if I go out there and all of our attorneys and all of our volunteers, we have hundreds of the top litigators in the world volunteering their time, some of them at $1,500 an hour. If BP springs a leak in the Gulf, these are the people they call. We got the best people in the country donating their time. But all this stuff we're doing, if we're holding back the floodgates for freedom so people can walk in and exercise it, if nobody does it, we're fools. So, my job means nothing if groups like this aren't successful in getting believers to walk in and make a difference in where they are, where God has them. So I thank you for doing that. You bring me encouragement in what I do, and we'd love to help you in any way we can if you ever need our help. I think we're going to do questions at some point now. You coming up, or who's doing it?
That was awesome. I know I was enlightened today by some of the things you said. Okay, I've got two people that have a mic in the room. Where's Debbie? Where's Scott?
I got one.
Oh. I'm mixed up. Okay. So what we're going to do here, we've never done this before, so I think we're going to just allow you to ask some questions. Kelly lies up here. We're going to do that for a few minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and do the raffle and get you out of here. So who'd like to start?
We got one back here.
Thanks for coming. In your opinion, who is the key driver between the misinformation and intent of separation of church and state?
There are groups, that's their main purpose. I would say the attacks on religious freedom are coming from two separate motivations. And again, being as charitable as I can to these folks, because I've been doing this for 25 years. So I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt on motivations and still tell you the two main motivations. One is an anti-religious motivation, very well intentioned. They just think that the country would be better if religion would go away. And that's what they think. They think it's superstition, it gets in the way of rational discourse. And so groups like the Freedom from Religion Foundation, ultimately the Americans United for Separation won't admit it, but if you look, almost every one of their leaders are members of the Secular Humanist Society. So this is the motivation that ACLU, a lot of them are coming from. The other set of motivations for attacks aren't the anti-religious. Their motivation is that they think the government can solve our problems. And if we simply will consolidate more power with the government, then we can actually get to the root of solving these problems. And of course, religious groups and religious freedoms and people's individual rights get in the way of that. So again, the healthcare legislation is a great example. When the government does something big like this, you're going to always see the first hiccup is going to be religious freedom. Because you're not playing along. You've got to cave in. You've got to follow this program. So they're both well-intentioned, but one is an anti-religious and one is just government is the answer. And so we've got to have the religious people kind of move out of the way approach. Both those motivations are out there.
What's the status update on the HHS lawsuits, particularly the ones you're
There are 43 lawsuits out there, and there's two types of HHS lawsuits. One are the lawsuits by religious entities, and they're saying, you can't force us, this Catholic school or this Baptist school or whatever, to pay for abortifacients for our employees. That violates our faith. Those cases are in a bizarre state because what the Justice Department did is came in and said, well, yeah, we know we have this regulation there, but we're not going to enforce it because we're probably going to change it at some point. And so they wanted to move the case where they couldn't get a ruling because they knew that the ruling was not going to be good. So they have sort of delayed all those cases. So all of those cases around the country, including ours, are delayed. What eventually happened is in Washington, D.C., the Court of Appeals there finally got tired of this stalling tactic and said, okay, we want to see what your final regulations are going to be, and here's your date, which is about 30 days from now, or I don't know exactly how many days. We're within a month of that date, I think. So when that date comes, you're going to have something in stone, and you're going to start seeing things happen, I think, more things happen with regard to the religious entities. The other cases are the ones with businesses that are Christian businesses that say, you know, you're forcing me to violate my faith and my business. One of the things that you should find chilling is what the Justice Department has argued all over the country in these cases. One of their main arguments has been, once you enter into a for-profit business, you waive your religious freedoms. So if you want to feed yourself or your family, you don't have religious freedoms in your mind. Now, fortunately, the courts have mainly rejected that. But those cases are going to keep going. And I think we're going to end up with circuit splits eventually, courts of appeals going different ways. And as soon as that happens, the Supreme Court is going to have to take one of these, because you can't have the law be something different from one, depending on where you live. The Constitution and federal laws that apply nationwide have to be consistently applied. And so at the point you get a circuit split, the Supreme Court will probably take it and resolve it, but that could be 2 or 3 years from now. So there's still more that's ahead on this. So anyway.
One question here. Is there one in the back? Okay, go ahead.
As a lawyer, I need to ask, is this on? As a lawyer, I need to ask for clarification. I was general counsel of a national corporation at a time when staff members were expected to not deny privileges to board members, if you know what I mean, in the 70s. I'm talking about sex, alcohol, things like that. There was a cultural maturity that took place over the next 20 years. Parallel to that was the HIV stuff. And ignorance and fear drove a lot of the confusion over that, but it kind of cleared up as it did with sexual harassment. There seems to be much more, if you would, fear and ignorance about this subject. As is mentioned, there are forces driving it. But you see it as much locally, obviously, or regionally, as you do nationally. Unfortunately, I spent 10 years in Madison, Wisconsin, so I know what you're dealing with. But I guess my question really is, looking at that, and fear and ignorance, and telling us the court's 5-4, it has to be with confusion on the separation clause, I assume. Can you give us any guidance? You can tell us we've got all these individual rights, but if we're a government contractor, or if we're getting any government money, or if we're for-profit, what is your litmus test on the separation? What are the judges confused about? That, you know, government money was used to build this thing, I assume.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. I'd say number one, of course, whether there's a conspiracy, like, you know, people are talking to each other or not, you know, certainly the enemy, meaning Satan, has a goal nationwide, and this is all going to go in that direction. And the idea is to intimidate, to cause fear, and to give misinformation. The reality is, as our slides and stuff showed, I mean, we've now for 15 years been doing these cases, and we do a lot of them. And we win over 99% of our cases. I mean, we're winning the vast majority of these cases. There are some bad things happening. Certainly, you know, some dangers at the Supreme Court. But most of these religious freedoms cases have been wins. And what the danger, though, is the self-censorship. And the best example I can give you is like the group from Madison, Wisconsin, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They sent out letters all over the country to counties, cities, school districts, threatening, saying, you know, if you don't take that cross off your city seal, we're going to sue you. Well, this is Steubenville, Ohio. The steeple they were talking about on the city seal is a Franciscan church that was there when they founded it, you know? It's ridiculous to take that off. But Steubenville goes, well, if even though Liberty says they'll give us free attorneys and the top law firms in the country and all this, if we lose, we got to pay their attorneys' fees. We can't risk that, so we're just going to take the steep law. So this is what's happening right now across the country, is the letters are going out, and we're losing our country, really the religious freedoms, the religious heritage, things like crosses and symbols and things are being taken down, not because anybody's losing cases, but because people are self-censoring and they're caving. And so a lot of the problem is fear. And like you say, separation of church and state. It's not, look at the First Amendment. It doesn't say that, okay? It says establishment of religion. And most of the case laws don't use the term separation of church and state. But it's a nomenclature that people use in public to confuse and kind of try to intimidate and try to shut religion out of the public sphere, which has never been the law. An example is that Coons case I told you about with the cheerleaders. Again, that letter came from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and that superintendent should have said, and the school district should have said, get lost, but they didn't. They turned around and they threatened the kids. As soon as we came into court, who won? The kids won. Religious freedom won. But so a lot of this is all about whether people can intimidate and encourage really Christians to self-censor. And if we won't, the law's on our side. And if you ever have a question on anything you think is close to law, call us. I mean, we're happy to help, and we're kind of weird lawyers. We don't charge you. So, we'll help you any way we can. But it really is, there's an atmosphere and a cultural attack and all this, but it's not, I wouldn't root it in the law. I would root it more in something much different from that.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. You'll be around afterwards if someone has some questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's give them enough. Items. First of all, if you haven't taken the fire assessment, which it's on the website, and particularly if you own a business, I would recommend you do this, but if you're a worker, or if you're in the for-profit range, I would suggest that you take that. I think it was personally kind of humbling for me, and it's a third-party objective opinion of how you're living out your faith, integrity in the workplace. Also, if you'd like to sign up for that fire study that Rick was talking about earlier, you have the opportunity to do that. Mark your calendars, 2 things. One is the Faith in the Workplace, which is coming up on March 7th. That's an evening dinner, and that's going to be here again, Thursday, March 7th, 6 to 8:45 p.m. here at the Overland Park Marriott. They're also selling tables if any of you'd like to sponsor a table, or you can purchase an individual ticket. And then our next quarterly luncheon is going to be April 25th. Where did I put that? It's here, 11:30 to 1. Again, if you want to come a half an hour early, 11:30, there's some good networking that went on here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do the door prizes, and then I'll close us in prayer and we'll get you out of here. So Kathy, could you come up? Need a mic.